Great day to be at Life Point Crossing. Hey, you guys, welcome again. My name's Ross. Welcome to the dramatic conclusion of this series called Adulting. We've been going through some just very, very simple things with the basic idea that, man, if we just get a couple of things that are all well within your control, if we get these right, then you will be able to make it through life with a minimum of pain and trouble and disaster. And the basic the basic outline for this series came from just a napkin that was on my kitchen table probably 6-7 years ago when my son Charles and I were just having dinner. Laura was at work, and it seemed like he was maybe a little nervous about the growing up in the adult world. And of course, we don't mean to, but we do this as adults when our kid does a kid thing. We're like a successful 40-year-old would never do that. You know, and they're like, oh, high school's hard. We're like, wait till college, they'll show you hard. Along with that, we happened to live, like, it was a fine house and neighborhood, but we were in really a pretty low-rent town in New Hampshire. Lots of people struggling. Huge drug problem. Way disproportionate levels of homelessness, and he was very well aware of all this. These were realities to him. He was not sheltered, and so he was nervous, and we would understand. And so we tried to impress on him on one level that adult life is serious and you can mess it up, but also, you know what, you can do it. Just a few simple things, and you will never have any trouble having food, having clothes on your back, a roof over your head, and at the very least, ramen in your pot. And so here's what we've been talking about was just show up at work. Not when you want to or when you feel like it, but every time you're supposed to be at work. Don't get addicted to substances. Not only can they cost an arm and a leg, they can ruin your life in a dozen other ways. Don't make a baby in a situation that's not conducive to raising a baby. Don't cross the law. You know what they can do to you? Basically anything, and avoid unnecessary debt. And so if you do all of these, you will be in great shape. If you mess one of these up, probably you're still going to be fine. If you mess up more than one, then things can really turn into a struggle. But we can do this. And isn't it amazing that I didn't even mean to or intend this when I was writing them down, but when you step back and you look and say, you know what, every one of those is very, very biblical. I had no trouble making messages out of any one of those. And so if you've been here this whole time, you're like, yeah, it's amazing, right, that the things that were written in the Bible 2,000 to 4,000 years ago are in my best interest and very, very helpful. Well, also, maybe you've been here, or maybe you haven't, but you look at those and you're thinking, you know, I kind of have messed a couple of those up. Honestly, maybe I went, nope, like 0 for 5. And I tell you, Ross, my life has been more difficult than it had to be. Like, there's definitely some things that I would have loved to go back and done differently, but even though it's been hard, I can't really say it's been bad. Really, it's been pretty good. Maybe you're here and you're 80, and you've been amening every message because you have lived the consequences of what happens when we violate these, but also you made it to 80, and along with that, you're healthy enough to be here, and you've, on somewhere along the way, also come to find and follow and love and serve Jesus with your whole heart. And so you're saying, yeah, it would have been a lot easier if I had done this, but I made it, and I've done pretty well. Maybe some others of you are here, and you also look at that and you think you've done pretty well. Like you've really done pretty well. You've been here, you've loved this series because it's all been talking about things that you've done well at, and so that's sometimes a lot more fun than hearing about the things where you have your next steps to take. And so you're 5 for 5. You're a little bit proud of yourself, and you've had some hard things happen in life because life had some hard things. But you've, by any measure, done really well. You have been showing up at work for 15 or 20 years. They started giving you raises. They started giving you promotions. They started giving you promotions with raises. You might like to have a drink now and then, or you favor a cigar on a special occasion, but no substance has been any real player in your life. You actually have gotten a couple of people pregnant, or gotten pregnant a couple times, not a couple people, but you made a couple babies. You made a couple babies, but you brought them into a situation that was conducive to raising babies. And so, of course, it's a challenge. It's always a challenge. But you never had to pay child support or try to collect child support. And you and your spouse worked together as a team. And it was challenging, but I mean, one of the greatest blessings that life has to offer. And since you've never really been in a desperate situation, there was never a time where you were really that tempted to cross the law in any serious way. A couple of speeding tickets, maybe, and you had some credit card debt when you were young, but you got out of that, you learned your lesson, and now you've been living well below your means for a long time. It was scary when you first bought your house, but then that payment has stayed the same and your income has grown, and so now that's easy. You're ahead of schedule on retirement. Your vacations are starting to get pretty nice, and one day you wake up and you think, I'm kind of doing it. I mean, it took some discipline, it took some hard work, but it wasn't really that difficult. And now you're like, here I am at 30, 40, 50, closing in on 60, wherever you are, and kind of seems like I've dodged the real potholes in life. I can just kind of keep doing what I'm doing and cruise on into retirement and doing what, sitting on the back porch drinking lemonade with the pups, or playing a lot more golf, or going to beaches, or going to better beaches, whatever it is you want to do. Every metric is trending very, very strongly toward freedom to do what you want. Congratulations, you made it. And it's not that doesn't sound appealing, it does. But also you've really started to taste it. You have had some good vacations. You have played some really good golf or some really great golf courses. You've really enjoyed being on some beautiful beaches. You've loved it. But if you let yourself be too quiet for too long, there's also been this thing that's kind of come up in your mind that asks you, was this worth it? Does this really even make any sense? Like, you've been doing it and working hard and living your life and doing well, but why? Just so that I can retire and play more golf or better golf, or I love beaches, but if I'm just going to lay on a beach so that I can get up the next morning and lay on a beach for as long as I'm healthy enough to lay on a beach, it kind of seems like that hasn't really gotten me a lot. It's better than struggling. If those are the only two options of live for a while with some very pleasant meaningless, or live for a while with some struggle, but it seems then like they kind of dovetail into the exact same place anyway, don't they? And what I hope is not surprising to you is you're not the first person to ever ask that kind of question or come into that kind of situation. And there's a book in our Old Testament that's called Ecclesiastes that presents some very unique interpretive challenges, for sure, but it also says some things very clearly. And it was written by a kind of teacher king, generally believed to be Solomon, who was, of course, the wisest and wealthiest person of their world. If ever there was anybody who had arrived, this was the one. Whatever he wanted, he had the freedom and power for it. And here's a portion of what he wrote. He said, so I became greater than all who had lived in Jerusalem before me, and my wisdom never failed me. Anything I wanted, you know what I would do? I'd take it. You know what pleasures I denied myself? No pleasures. I even found great pleasure in hard work, a reward for all my labors. He wanted leisure and relaxation. He had wine and beautiful gardens. He wanted entertainment. They'd bring in the greatest singers that anybody in their world had ever heard. If he wanted different kind of entertainment, he had concubines like nobody's business. He wanted to be waited on hand and foot, then he had servants to do that. And you might even be tempted to think, well, that's the problem. He had it too easy. He was King David's boy. And then by the time he came into power, things were good in Israel, and then they just got better. He just never got to experience the satisfaction of a job well done and overcoming a really difficult challenge. No, he says he even found great pleasure in hard work. Man, he had everything. But as I looked at everything that I had worked so hard to accomplish, it was also meaningless, like chasing the wind. What was worth anything? There was nothing really worthwhile anywhere. The good news is that it's not really that difficult to make it through life. I mean, on some basic level, everybody makes it through to the end of their life, whenever the end of their life is, and no matter how long that is, right? That's where we all end up. And we won't go into the specifics, but that's really actually, if we kept going in Ecclesiastes 2, this is exactly the point that he starts to make. But it really does leave a very, very major question unanswered. Because when you're younger, you don't even have to wonder or worry. There's a very obvious reason for everything you do. You get up and go to work because you need food, clothing, and shelter. And then on top of that, there's some varieties of those that are very preferable to some others. And so then once you get kind of your day-to-day, month-to-month life under you a little bit, then you start to progress past the month-to-month into saving for the future and that retirement. It's self-evident how that's all very important, right? Of course it's important. And it is important. Except for then there's this trick that kind of gets played on you, where it's the most important thing until you have it. And then, now that you've worked and hustled and succeeded, this question comes back. Why? Because as I finished with these 5 points to Charles in the napkin, I did not then say, if you manage to succeed in these 5 areas, you will live a happy and prosperous life, which may or may not be true. What I said is, if you manage to succeed in these areas, then you will arrive very safely at death. At which time, whatever level of safety we arrive at immediately becomes irrelevant. And so there are no wrong times to learn this, but there are definitely better times, and younger is definitely better to learn that living your life is not worth giving your life to. Arriving safely at death is not worth giving your life to. And so it's true that Ecclesiastes has its interpretive challenges, but a sort of broad, big picture interpretive principle that we can use is, you know what? The Old Testament points to Jesus. It's really pretty remarkable how reliable that is. The Old Testament points to Jesus. So let's see what Jesus has to say in Mark 6. He says kind of the same thing. What do you benefit? And if you gain the whole world but lose your soul? Well, obviously the answer is no benefit. None at all. And I wanted Charles to benefit. I want you to benefit. Frankly, I want to benefit. And so I didn't say that he would live a happy, healthy life. I said that he would arrive safely at death, because I thought that might be a little bit encouraging and comforting on one hand, but also a little bit perspective broadening on the other. And so then I left as much space as there was space on the napkin. I went down to the very bottom and I said, and if you want it to be meaningful, add Jesus. What is it you're really trying to get out of life? What is your hoped-for outcome? Past the silly T-shirt slogans or throwaway Facebook quotes about dying with the most toys and leaving a good-looking corpse or whatever. Nobody cares. You know that. What is it that you really want? Really think it through. Ask the question. And I will bet that for most all of us, maybe all of us, it comes down to meaning or purpose. Solomon, writing Ecclesiastes, is one of the, now I think probably millions of people who has lived, who has gotten everything he wanted, only to realize that it wasn't actually what he wanted. Which might sound disappointing, but it's really an incredibly beautiful gift. Ecclesiastes is 6 pages in my print Bible. It uses the word meaningless 38 times. That's more than 6 times per page, every single page for 6 straight pages. So I think this is really a very interesting question. Why is it that there is this thing in us that needs meaning and purpose? Why is it that we actually ask why? Why is that such an important question to us? Why is life with everything except meaning and purpose Still so depressing or so deflating when we can't find that. There used to be a beer commercial that said, "Why ask why?" What I think they meant was, don't worry about it, just keep drinking beer. But it actually turns out to be a pretty good question. Why do we ask why? And why is it so devastating for us if we can't find a good answer? I have two different thoughts from two different people. One of them, if you know me, there aren't really a lot of things I love, but I love comedy. And so I saw a little clip or reel or whatever of a comedian who fairly recently, last few months, and he said, "Do you know where you find the saddest men?" He said, "Guitar Center." If you know me, I love comedy and guitars. He said, the place to find the saddest men is Guitar Center. He said, behind the counter are sad, failed, struggling musicians. And then past them are sad, middle-aged men walking around, looking up at the wall of guitars, saying, "Oh, is that a custom color? It is, isn't it? I wonder if I added that to my collection, if that would fill whatever this void is in the middle of my chest." And then he stopped, and he actually said, "I don't know, I don't have any solutions." This is a stand-up comedian who recognized the problem, and he knows it's so universal that he can make jokes about it, and everybody will understand, and then has enough honesty to say, "Yeah, I have no idea. Not a clue what to do." That's one. Number two is somebody who a lot of you may know, C.S. Lewis. Some of you know him as the man who wrote those fun kids' Narnia books. Some others of you know him as a fairly serious theologian. Turns out you're both right. And here's something that he wrote that I think is particularly insightful in his book called Mere Christianity. He says, "Creatures are not born with desires unless satisfaction for those desires exists." I might understand, but I'm not sure. Can you help me make sure I understand? He says, yeah, a baby feels hunger. Okay, well, there's such thing as food. Okay, I understand. It'd be really weird if we were hungry and then there was just nothing particular to do about that. Says, okay, well, a duckling wants to swim. Well, there's such a thing as water. He's like, all right, I got it. It would be really weird if you wanted to swim if swimming wasn't some sort of thing. Now, what's your point? Where are we going with this? Well, men feel sexual desire. We didn't have to go there, CS. I got it. But, okay, here we are. So men feel sexual desire. Well, good news. There is such a thing as sex. Where are you going? Here's where you go. So, if I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, does that mean that probably my whole theory and hypothesis gets blown up? No, of course not. Not at all. That would be unbelievable. Here's what's the most probable explanation, is that I was made for another world. And so there's this deep desire in all of us for purpose and for meaning, and for what psychologists might call transcendence, that goes past anything that having a great life in this world can offer. And the most probable explanation for that is that you were created for something that this life does not, cannot offer. And so I hope my son has a great life. I want you to have a great life. But here's what's worse than having a life of bumping from low-end job to low-end job at the mercy of drugs and alcohol, in and out of prison, and living with a crushing debt that you'll never, ever pay off, is succeeding at a life that doesn't matter. You gain the whole world, but lose your soul. And then, of course, when you die, you lose whatever you gained anyway, so congratulations on your spotless preseason record. Hey, like, you won the press conference, you looked good in warm-ups and coming in to the arena, which that's fine, that's all great, but if that's all you do, it just doesn't matter. But the good news is you have a desire for more because you are created for more, and the more exists in something way better than guitar and a custom color. Here's the full quote from Jesus. If you've been coming for a while, you may have seen this before. Then calling the crowd to join his disciples. He's saying this to everybody. If any of you wants to be my follower, you must, what? Turn from your selfish ways, take up your cross, and follow me. Sounds terrible, Jesus. Why do you make everything so bad? Says, but because if you try to hang on to your life, that's when you lose it. But when you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of the good news, then you will save it. And what do you benefit? If you gain the whole world but lose your soul, here's how you benefit. Here's how you really benefit both in this life and in the next life. Is you forget about yourself. You give your life over and make it about living for something bigger than yourself, which is the good news of Jesus and the glory of God. In some ways, it can probably be argued that you can do that better in a life that's less chaotic, but honestly, it really doesn't matter. There is no wrong situation to lay down your life, turn it over to Jesus, and live for His good news and the glory of God. There is no wrong situation for that. There is no life that cannot be instantaneously transformed from dying and meaningless, from living for what is meaningless, to eternal and infinite, for living for what is eternal and infinite. You guys, live a great life. I want you to have a great life. God has clearly given you all the wisdom and insight and knowledge you need to live life with as little difficulty and as little pain as is possible. But don't live your life for your life's sake. Give yourself up to Jesus Christ, to living for Him and His glory and His good news. That is what you are created for. That is why you were created, to find yourself in loving and following and serving Him. Give yourself over to His love and His authority. Say yes to, you've heard these words, but I choose them very carefully. Say yes to having Him make you into the person that He created you to be, where that's maybe what you would think you would like, or maybe where you wouldn't, and living the life that He has for you, maybe where that's what you think you would like, and maybe where that's wouldn't. This is the answer. This is the way. Nothing else in the world will ever satisfy, and it's all done for you. If you just pick it up and take it. Guys, let's pray. Listen, if you're here, and for whatever reason you've never made that decision, that commitment, this is the day, and this is the moment. You know that living for yourself does not end where you want it to end. And I know it feels and sounds so counterintuitive, but not only is this what our God and Creator says is real, this is what millions of people over thousands of years have experienced and testified to what is real. That life has purpose and meaning when you live as you're created to live, which is not for yourself, but is for the glory of God. Look, just right where you sit, you can pray out loud to God or just talk to Him in your heart. If you're watching online, it's the same. Say, God, I believe that Jesus Christ came and died and resurrected so that I could be forgiven and be adopted as a child in your family forever. Please come into my life. Begin to make me into the person you created me to be, and give me the life that you have for me. If you prayed a prayer like that for the first time, it's not the words or the prayer that saves you. It's nothing really that you do. It's that your faith is in Jesus, and through that, God's grace comes to you, and you are a forgiven, adopted child in His family and a brand new creature spiritually. Please let somebody know. If there's a friend who you came with or someone out at the point, that's just the corner in the lobby when you came in, or you can send us a message, email. We'd love to get you started with some good, healthy next steps toward living the life that God has for you. You're not created to do it alone, but it is what you are created for. For the rest of us, I know that if we make this a simple salvation message, then probably most of us on some level have been living for God for a long time now, but goodness, you know as well as I do, and I know as well as you do, my life isn't so different from yours, how easy and how natural it is to slide back into living for yourself. You know better. I know it's so easy. Make that commitment again today, right now. Make it every day, every moment if you need to, or if you have to, or if you can, because you know that not only is that what you're created for, but you benefit. This is how you benefit. God has made living for Him in your best interest. Father, thank you so much for for the people here who are committing and have committed to you. Father, your Spirit, please give us what we cannot do for ourselves and give us the strength and courage and follow through to step into in very, very real, tangible ways exactly who you have created us to be, and give us the lives that you have for us as individuals, as a church community of faith, and as everything that you have for us here in this world and in this life and for your glory. In the name of Jesus.